My daughter-in-law and son left for a cruise alone. But when my son discovered my truth, the kitchen of the small carriage house smelled of onions and peppers slowly softening in the skillet. Oilia stood at the stove, moving the spatula automatically, more out of habit than hunger. Years ago, she had owned every brick and beam of the sprawling main house at the top of the drive. After her husband died, she had transferred the deed and the business to her only son, Tavorius, believing she was passing him a crown. Instead, she had handed him a buffet table. Hit that subscribe button and tap the bell icon so you never miss our latest uploads. Now she lives tucked behind the estate in the guest cottage, the way people sometimes tuck away things they don't want to throw out but don't want to see. The door opened with a tired creak and a gust of cold air pushed into the warm kitchen. Tavorius stepped inside, eyes avoiding hers, and behind him swept his wife, Kenyatta, draped in drama and perfume. "Mom, we need to talk," Tavorius murmured, fingers working a button on his blazer. Kenyatta didn't wait for him. She slid her coat off a shoulder and flung it onto a chair. "Mother Oilia, we're in a disaster," she announced, voice syrupy and theatrical. "Remember the roof? The leak in the east wing?" Of course she remembered. Only days earlier, Oilia had taken nearly all she had, $15,000 saved for her funeral and emergencies, and handed it to them. They had sworn the old house would rot without urgent repair. Now Kenyatta was clutching her chest with a sigh. The contractor opened everything up. Mold. Rotten beams. The bill exploded. We even had to dig into our own pockets. There's simply no money left. And there it was, the real reason they'd come. "We can't take you on the cruise," Kenyatta said suddenly, and there was a brief flash of satisfaction in her eyes before she smothered it with a pout. "We barely scraped enough for our tickets. You understand, don't you? Your ticket will have to wait. Someone has to stay and watch the house, keep an eye on the workers, and water the plants. You're so good with all that." Tavorius finally lifted his eyes, shame swimming behind his pupils. "I'm sorry, Mama. It's better for you to rest. We'll bring you something from the duty-free." "Yes, guard the house," Kenyatta added, lips pursed in false grief. "Someone has to stay behind while we try to breathe for a week." As she spoke, her sleeve slipped. A bracelet glittered on her wrist, a pale stream of diamonds in white gold. Oilia knew the design. She had worn similar pieces back when her name meant something in shipping and freight. That bracelet alone could have paid for the roof twice. Kenyatta noticed where she was looking and tugged the sleeve down in a hurry. "If there's no money, there's no money," Oilia said, her voice level. "You two go. I'll watch the house." They were thrown off by her calm. They had expected tears, pleading, guilt. Instead, she turned down the stove and set their plates aside untouched while they rushed out, already talking about packing and spa reservations. That night, after washing dishes and wiping the table, she carried a bag of garbage out toward the big dumpster near the main gate. The wind nudged a ball of crumpled heavy paper out of the bin and rolled it to her feet. She bent to pick it up. The quality made her pause. This wasn't a grocery slip. She smoothed the paper under the weak street lamp. The logo at the top read Apex Voyages. The text below, reservation, Grand Owner Suite, Riverboat, Gilded Magnolia. Total, $15,000. Payer, Tavorius St. James. It was the same amount she had handed over, for the roof. The night around her seemed to fade. The barking dog down the street, the whisper of leaves, even the chill, everything dimmed. Only the number stared back at her. 15,000. Her sacrifice turned into their vacation. Her heart didn't race. Instead, it settled into a slow, steady rhythm like a big engine warming up. The tears that might have come for a helpless old woman didn't appear. Once upon a time, before aprons and casseroles, she had signed checks that moved fleets. Her son and his wife had forgotten that. She folded the invoice carefully and slid it into her cardigan pocket. Inside the carriage house, she locked the door, walked to her bedroom, and pulled a worn leather planner from the bottom drawer. Inside was one number written in blue ink, the direct line of a man she hadn't called in more than a decade. She dialed. The phone rang long enough to test her resolve. Speaking. A rough male voice finally answered. "Who is this?" "Hello, Cyprine," she said, her tone as hard as tempered steel. "This is Olivia St. James. I'm activating my executive override. I need a stateroom on the Gilded Magnolia immediately." Silence hummed at the other end. "Oilia," he breathed. "It's really you. Don't ask why. Listen. I need the current ownership structure for Riverflow Holdings. All subsidiaries. Now." Within minutes he called back. What he told her made the corners of her mouth lift for the first time in days. The river cruise company behind the Gilded Magnolia was still tucked under the umbrella of a group she had helped purchase years before. Old agreements and silent shares had never been revoked. She wasn't begging for a favor. She was reclaiming a ship that had always, legally, partly belonged to her. Over the next 2 days, while her son and his wife packed, argued over outfits, and boasted to friends online about their upcoming once-in-a-lifetime river suite, she worked the phones from behind a closed bathroom door with the water running. She called her lawyer, Solomon, an old friend with a voice like creaking hinges. She contacted the holding company's board. She got a message relayed to the ship's captain, Emmerich Thaddeus, a former junior officer she vaguely remembered as honest and straight-backed. By the time dawn broke on departure day, power of attorney access was revoked, operational control for the duration of the voyage was shifted, and the captain had fresh instructions waiting in his inbox. In a cedar wardrobe hidden in the back of her closet, she found clothes her daughter-in-law had never laid eyes on. She chose a cream linen pantsuit and a silk scarf in autumn shades. The old woman who guarded cats and potatoes disappeared in the mirror. In her place stood the woman who used to walk through boardrooms and sign contracts that reshaped river routes. When the SUV roared to life at the main house, she stepped onto the porch in her ordinary raincoat, plain scarf wrapped tight, clutching a battered bag. "Where are you going?" Tavorius asked, juggling luggage. "I won't be sitting at home," she replied softly. "I'm going to help Sister Alpha. Her back is acting up. I promised I'd stay with her for a week." From the car window, Kenyatta shouted, sunglasses already in place. "Perfect. Less electricity wasted. Don't forget to leave the keys with the neighbor. We're late, baby, let's go." The SUV sped off, leaving tire marks and exhaust. Exactly 30 minutes later, a long black sedan rolled up to the gate. The driver got out, opened the rear door, and bowed slightly. "Mrs. St. James, Captain Thaddeus sends his regards. Your transfer is ready." Oilia stepped into the leather interior, dropped the old raincoat beside her, adjusted her silk scarf, and watched herself in the rearview mirror. The woman reflected back at her that it was no one's burden. She was the owner returning to inspect her property. The drive to the port in New Orleans cut through morning traffic like a knife. The car carried a permit that cleared checkpoints and slipped past the long line of vacationers dragging overstuffed suitcases, sweating under the sun. Children cried. People argued with staff. The mass of humanity edged slowly toward the main boarding area. Their vehicle didn't join them. The driver steered toward a gated, quiet zone marked "Authorized Personnel Only." The security guard took one look at the license plate and raised the barrier. Up close, the Gilded Magnolia looked less like a boat and more like a floating hotel, tiered decks stacked with glass and polished railings. The Mississippi lapped at its hull, brown and powerful. The sedan stopped at the gangway reserved for VIP and owners. 2 crew members in crisp white uniforms came hurrying down. "Mrs. St. James," one said, taking her simple suitcase as though it were sacred. "Welcome aboard. The captain is honored to have you. Your suit is prepared." She followed them onto the ship, the hum of engines and the murmur of boarding passengers drifting up from below. Somewhere among that noise, behind a chain-link fence, she spotted a familiar figure struggling with luggage. Her son, red in the face, while Kenyatta gestured and barked at a porter. Neither of them glanced toward the VIP ramp. They were too absorbed in their own drama to notice the black car or the woman in the white suit. Inside, They led her to the owner's suite. It was large and serene, floor-to-ceiling windows, a separate bedroom, gleaming wood, plush carpet, a private segment of deck. She didn't pause to admire it. Instead, she went straight to the wall monitor, switched it on, and pulled up the internal camera feeds. One screen showed the bustling lobby where regular guests checked in, including her son and daughter-in-law. Another camera showed the hallway outside Suite 404. Yet another, the inside of that room. She watched as they made their way along the carpeted corridor, mouths flattened into smug smiles. Suite 404's door opened, and they stepped into a space that matched every lavish picture in the brochure. Balcony, huge bed, champagne on ice. The room she had unknowingly paid for. Kenyatta twirled, her dress a bright streak against cream walls. Baby, look at this. Look at the bathroom. The balcony. This is freedom. Tavorius sank into an armchair, breathing hard but grinning. Worth every cent, he sighed. Mama didn't even argue. She just stood there like always, hugging that old shopping bag. On the screen, Kenyatta hunched over, shuffling across the carpet in a cruel parody of an elderly gait. "Oh, children, you go," she croaked, mimicking Oilia. "I'll stay here with my tea and the cats. You have fun." They collapsed into laughter. "She believes everything," Kenyatta said, adjusting her diamond bracelet. "Say no money, and she folds. She exists so we don't have to think about bills." "Well, let her guard the house," Tavorius replied, raising his champagne flute. "We're royalty this week." They clinked their glasses and drank, spilling foam onto the carpet. Oilia sat in her own suite, coffee steady in her hand. Their words washed over her like static. The hurt had burned away in the night. What remained was a cool, clear understanding. They saw her as a resource, not as family. She picked up the ship's internal phone and dialed a short code. "Captain Thaddeus," a deep voice answered. "Captain," she said, her tone businesslike. "Your guests in Suite 404 have left for a walk. It's time." "Yes, ma'am," he replied. Phase 2. Proceed. Her instructions were simple. Reassign the luxury suite, move their luggage, and downgrade them to a lower category cabin without explanation until necessary. Freeze their onboard spending access tied to her accounts. Mark her son and his wife specialize in security logs. No extra comforts. No extra indulgences. An hour later, the gilded Magnolia let out a prolonged horn blast and eased away from the dock. The river swallowed the city noise, replacing it with water, wind, and distant gulls. On the public deck, cameras showed her son and daughter-in-law at the bar, fussing at the barman over the amount of ice in their cocktails. When they returned to Suite 404, the fun began. Tavorius tapped his keycard against the lock. Red. He tried again, more forcefully. Still red. "What are you doing?" Kenyatta snapped. "Open it. I need to change." "It's glitching." He wiped the card on his jacket and tried a third time. Red again. A senior steward appeared, posture straight, expression polite but distant. "May I assist you?" "This card is broken," Kenyatta barked, brandishing it. "Open our suite. Now. Our luggage is inside." The steward checked his tablet, frowned slightly, and then met their gaze with practiced calm. "I'm sorry for the inconvenience," he said. "But there was a correction made in the booking system. This suite has been reserved under a priority shareholder list. An asset reallocation was processed. Your new accommodation has been assigned. We paid $15,000 for this room." Tavorius exploded. "We're not moving." "Your belongings have already been transferred," the steward replied. "You've been allocated a cabin matching your confirmed status." He held out two heavy keys engraved with the number 0012. "Where is that?" Kenyatta demanded, eyes narrowing. "Lower deck, aft section, near the engineering block," he answered evenly. "The engine room?" Her voice cracked with fury. "Are you out of your mind? We are not going to sleep next to a machine. Get your manager. Get your captain. Now. The administration office is in the VIP Sun Deck Lounge, the steward said, gesturing toward the upper level. You may address your concerns there. But the cabin assignment is final. Kenyatta snatched the keys and threw them at her husband's chest. Come on, she hissed. We're going to tear this joke of a company apart. They stormed up the stairs, stomping and shouting, blind with indignation. On the sun deck, under a canvas awning, Oilia sat alone at a table, a book open in front of her and a small cup of espresso at hand. The river glittered in late light around the ship. A waiter stood discreetly to the side. The door burst open. Kenyatta's voice cut through the peaceful air like a siren. Where is the manager? Bring someone out here right now. We've been thrown into a storage closet. They saw only a stylish older woman in a flawless white suit and wide-brimmed hat. Kenyatta charged forward, not recognizing her at first. Then the woman calmly took off her sunglasses. Her son's stride faltered. His mouth fell open. Kenyatta froze mid-shout. Mama! Tavorius breathed. You! Kenyatta choked out. What are you doing here? Drinking coffee, Oilia replied calmly. Or at least I was until you began yelling. Tavorius' confusion flipped instantly to aggression. Are you following us? He shouted, desperation fraying his voice. Have you lost your mind? Get off this ship. Go home. You don't belong here. It's our money, Kenyatta snarled, stepping closer. You stole our trip. You never fixed the roof, did you? You wasted our savings chasing us. She reached out, fingers curled to seize Oilia's lapel. Remove your hands. The command boomed across the deck. It wasn't loud, but it was absolute. Captain Thaddeus stood at the entrance, uniform immaculate, gold stripes catching the light. Two security officers loomed behind him. He stepped between Oilia and Kenyatta, his shadow falling over the younger woman. Keep your hands away from the owner of this vessel, he said, each word carved in ice. Owner. Tavorius laughed shakily, pointing at his mother. You're mistaken, Captain. She's retired. She lives in a guest cottage. She clips coupons and drinks discount tea. She doesn't own anything. The captain turned his cold gaze on him. Mr. St. James, he said, voice going even colder. Allow me to clarify. Mrs. Oilia St. James holds controlling interest in Riverflow Holdings. She owns this shipping line, the port we left this morning, and this riverboat from bow to stern. You are standing in her private space. The words barely seemed to register. The world in which Tavorius was the clever one and his mother a simple old woman cracked like glass. Beside him, Kenyatta swayed, gripping the back of a chair. That's impossible, she whispered. She signed everything over to us. Technically, the captain continued mercilessly, this is her living room. Your outburst and attempted assault make you uninvited guests here. Tavorius' legs buckled. He dropped to his knees with a dull thud. Kenyatta followed, sinking down as though gravity had doubled. They stared up at the woman they had mocked, who sat calmly stirring a cooling cup of coffee. Captain, Oilia said quietly, not bothering to look directly at them. My drink is getting cold. Please escort these people elsewhere. I have no desire to be disturbed. Security took them by the arms and led them away. Not off the ship. Not yet. Their punishment had only begun. They were taken to cabin 0012. No windows, near the engine hum, where even the glasses on the shelf trembled with the vibration. A place made for long, echoing nights with nothing to drown out their thoughts. The gilded magnolia slipped deeper along the river as daylight faded into amber. Above, guests in sparkling clothes posed for photos and wandered buffets. Somewhere below, in the metal cage of cabin 0012, voices rose and collided in anger. Olivia let them cool. By evening, she had changed into a simple but elegant dinner dress and made her way to a private dining room called the Romanoff. It was small and paneled in dark wood, with lamps casting a soft glow over the long table. Only one place at the head was set: plate, glass, cutlery. The seats opposite remained bare, except for a thick grey folder placed in the center. Right on time, the door opened. Tavorius and Kenyatta entered, stiff and nervous. Both looked like they had aged 10 years in a single afternoon. Kenyatta had swapped dresses, choosing black as though mourning something she hadn't yet named. Tavorius' blazer was wrinkled and his collar slightly askew. "Mama," he began, forcing a smile. "We're glad you agreed to talk. This whole thing just got out of hand." "Mother Oilia," Kenyatta added quickly, sitting down as if her bones no longer wanted to hold her. "What a horrible misunderstanding. You know us. We're emotional. The shock of being moved, the noise, the stress with the house. We weren't thinking clearly. You must see we only wanted what's best for you." The table remained empty in front of them. No menus appeared. No water glasses. Only the smell of her baked fish and the faint clink of her knife and fork. They glanced around, confused. "Are we not eating?" Tavorius finally asked. "You have been eating at my expense for 5 years," Oilia answered calmly, laying her fork down. "I think you're full." He blinked. "I don't." She nudged the grey folder toward them with a slow, decisive push. "Open it." His fingers shook as he lifted the cover. The first page was a neat spreadsheet: dates, amounts, account numbers, notes. Lines highlighted in red. "That is not a cruise invoice," she said. "It's a forensic review of my personal accounts and the accounts you've had access to. Every helping mama line, every errand, every emergency." Tavorius' eyes raced over the pages. Kenyatta leaned in, color draining from her face. "Here," Oilia continued, recalling each line from memory. "Prescription pickup. Actual medication cost $400. The card charged $1,500. The difference, as it turns out, covered someone's salon visits." "Mama prices," he started. "Groceries. You brought a small bag of staples and wrote down $1,000 a week as household support. Gas for your SUV, clothes, restaurant bills. All wrapped in words like duty and help." He tried to speak again, but his throat seemed to tighten. "And then," she went on, "the roof. 15,000. The last of my savings. Money put aside so I wouldn't burden anyone with my dying days. You told me timber was rotting above my head. Instead, you bought champagne and balcony views for yourselves." Kenyatta broke first. "It was a loan," she cried. "We planned to pay it back. He's under pressure at work, deals falling through, stress." "Enough," Oilia said quietly. The word hit like a physical blow. "Don't pretend this was a moment of desperation. This was a pattern. You didn't come to help. You came to feed." She nodded at the back of the folder. "Check the last pages." Hands trembling, Tavorius flipped through. Letters from the bank. Documentation of revoked authorizations. Statements showing new signatures in place of old ones. "This morning," she explained, "I revoked every power of attorney. Cards linked to my accounts have been cancelled. Joint assets frozen pending investigation. Credit limits you used like hoses pouring out of my pocket have been cut off. Right now, your personal cards are empty. The bank you like to call ours is, in fact, mine." "You're pressing charges," he whispered, voice cracking. "I am documenting theft," she said. "What law enforcement does with that later will depend on how you behave going forward. But understand this, the tap you've been drinking from is dry." Kenyatta stood so quickly her chair scraped across the floor. "You can't do this," she shouted. "We're family. You raised him. You owe us. We're stuck on this boat, with nothing. What are we supposed to do, starve? How did you expect me to live when you were quietly bleeding me?" Oilia asked in return, her tone as calm as if she were asking for more tea. You weren't worried about whether I had groceries when you signed for manicures under my name. She folded her napkin carefully. This conversation is over. Go back to your cabin. You'll need rest. Tomorrow will be harder. She pressed a bell. The head of security appeared almost instantly at the door. Escort Mr. and Mrs. St. James to 0012, she said. They are not to incur any charges without my written approval. They left clutching the folder, their faces a mix of panic and disbelief. The door closed behind them with a soft click, but to Olivia it sounded like a vault ceiling shut. She ate her fish in silence. The triumph tasted less sweet than she had imagined. Justice could be bitter. Outside the portholes, the dark river flowed on, indifferent to family battles and bank records. Morning came dressed in fog. The river wore a soft grey shawl, and the ship moved through it quietly. On the upper deck, in a glass-enclosed solarium full of potted palms and orchids, Oilia sat with a blanket across her knees and a cup of herbal tea between her hands. She knew there had been shouting below deck during the night. Security had reported raised voices from cabin 0012, the familiar cycle of blame spinning in circles. When people who have always pointed outwards suddenly have no one else to accuse, they often turn on each other. The door to the solarium opened gently. A small, raw voice slipped in. Mother Oilia. She set her cup down and turned. Kenyatta stood there, stripped of her usual armor. No heavy makeup, no perfect curls, no dramatic jewelry. Her eyes were swollen and red. Her hands twisted the hem of her dress. May I sit? She asked. Sit, Oilia replied, gesturing to the chair opposite. Kenyatta perched on the edge, shoulders rounded as though trying to shrink into herself. I couldn't sleep, she said, tears starting anew. Tavorius. He's out of control. He yelled all night. He blames me for everything. I can't take it anymore. She sniffed, dabbing at her eyes. I didn't know how bad it was. He always told me the money was his, from bonuses, from business deals. I thought you were comfortable, that all those withdrawals were nothing to you. I'm as shocked as you are. She leaned forward, grabbing for connection. I never wanted to hurt you. I wanted us to be close. He's the one who poisoned things, talked bad about you, kept us separate. The roof story, that was his idea. I told him we shouldn't touch your savings, but he laughed and said you wouldn't understand anyway. She reached toward the table. I'll leave him when we get back. I'll find a job, pay you back every cent. Just, don't throw me away. Please. Give me a chance. Her performance was good. If Oilia hadn't watched her for 10 years, she might have believed the wide, guileless eyes and quivering mouth. As it was, she simply poured a second cup of tea. Drink, she said. Your throat must be tired. Kenyatta clutched the warm porcelain as if it were a lifeline. You're right about one thing, Oilia answered slowly. My son is weak. He let himself be shaped by whoever pushed hardest. But there's a detail you missed. She picked up her tablet from the table and tapped the screen. In the lower cabins, near engines, crew quarters, maintenance zones, we have constant audio monitoring for safety and insurance reasons. That includes 0012. Kenyatta's smile faltered. Sometimes, Oilia continued, truth is loud enough to be saved as evidence. She pressed play. The peaceful greenhouse filled with a very different version of her daughter-in-law's voice. Sharp, furious, unrestrained. You idiot, Tavorius. You spineless jellyfish. The recording blared. You couldn't even lie properly. As soon as we're off this boat, I'm getting a lawyer. We'll have her declared incompetent. She clearly thinks she's some kind of queen. We'll dump that old cow in the cheapest state home we can find and sell the house before she even knows what happened. Tavorius' recorded voice begged her to be quiet. She told him she didn't care who heard. Money mattered more than pride, more than family, more than the woman who had given them both everything. The living Kenyatta went white. Her hands shook. The tea rattled in the cup. That was anger, she stammered. I didn't mean it. People say crazy things when they're scared. You didn't want a mother-in-law, Oilia said softly, closing the tablet. You wanted a funding source. When you realized I still had more than you imagined, your first instinct was to find a way to take the rest. She rose slowly, rearranging the blanket on her lap. The sponsorship is over, she finished. You and my son can sort each other out without my money. Kenyatta tried one last time. Please, Mother Oilia, don't do this. This conversation is finished, Oilia said, turning her gaze back to the river. Enjoy the remainder of the voyage. Think about what you almost did. Footsteps retreated quickly. The door shut with a faint click. Later that day, the library doors flew open without a knock. Kenyatta barged in, gripping the sleeve of a ship's doctor in a white coat. Tavorius trailed behind, sweaty and frantic. She's here, Kenyatta cried. Doctor, do you see? She's dangerous. She's hallucinating. The doctor tried to calm her, but she clamped onto his arm. You don't understand, she insisted. She's having delusions. She thinks she owns the ship. She stole our money. She's locking us up. You need to medicate her and put it in writing for her own protection. Tavorius rushed closer, eyes wild. She's talking about shares and companies and control. She believes she's running everything. This is psychosis. If we don't act now, she'll destroy her own life, and ours with it. We need a medical report for guardianship, just something temporary until she stabilizes. Their plan was obvious. If manipulation and intimidation failed, brand her incompetent. With the right documents, they could seize control again under the excuse of caring for her. The doctor straightened his coat, freed his sleeve from Kenyatta's grip, and walked toward the desk where Oilia sat. Good afternoon, Mrs. St. James, he said, his tone respectful, even warm. How's your blood pressure today? Stable, Dr. Beecham, she replied, smiling faintly. The river air agrees with me. The silence behind them was thick. Kenyatta's mouth hung open. Tavorius blinked rapidly. You know each other? He asked the doctor weakly. I've been Mrs. St. James' physician for more than 20 years, Dr. Beecham answered coolly, turning to face them. I supervised her husband's recovery after his stroke. I monitor her heart, her scans, her mental status. He tapped his own temple. I've seen her brain imaging more times than I can count. Her cognitive function is excellent. Far better, in fact, than some of the younger clients I see who make very poor decisions. But she claims she owns, Kenyatta tried to interrupt. She does, he cut in. And she understands exactly where she is, why she's here, and how she got here. There's no psychosis. No dementia. No confusion. There is, however, a remarkable amount of disrespect being thrown at the only person in this situation acting like an adult. He pulled a small pad from his pocket, scribbled something quickly, tore off the sheet, and gave it to Tavorius. What's this? Tavorius asked. A bill, the doctor replied without sympathy. For a false emergency psychiatric consult, after hours, on a perfectly healthy patient. My time is expensive. Tavorius stared down at the amount. $500, he whispered. I don't have any money. Our cards. That, the doctor said, adjusting his glasses, is not my concern. It will be added to your cabin account. Either you pay before disembarking, or you discuss it with the authorities on shore. Good day. He nodded to Oilia, then left, closing the door firmly behind him. For a moment, the library was silent except for the soft hum of the ship. Her son and daughter-in-law stood like children caught cheating in class, faces drained of bravado. Leave, Oilia said, picking up her papers again, and close the door from the other side. They obeyed without argument this time. The latch clicked shut. Outside, the riverbanks began to change. The captain's voice crackled briefly over the internal system. announcing an unscheduled stop ahead at a small rural landing. The ship was about to make one more adjustment to its passenger list. By midday, the fog had thinned. The gilded Magnolia approached a lonely dock, a worn strip of concrete jutting into the water beneath leaning cypress trees. There were no taxis waiting, no bustling vendors, just wind, crows, and a stray dog exploring the shoreline. Oilia stood at the lower deck exit, wrapped in a camel coat with her silk scarf tucked neatly at the collar. Beside her, the head of security stood with arms folded, his expression unreadable. A crew member rolled out 2 of the largest suitcases the ship carried, along with 2 more smaller ones. All 4 were set down carefully on the dock, next to a thin folder. A moment later, Tavorius and Kenyatta appeared at the end of the corridor. They walked toward the open gangway slowly, confusion mixed with hope. Perhaps, they seemed to think, this was some sort of special shore excursion their mother had arranged to smooth things over. "Mama," Tavorius called, forcing a smile. "Is this a tour? Some historic stop? You didn't say we were getting off." "This is your stop," Oilia answered. The smile faltered. "Our stop. You told me there was no money and that I should stay home," she reminded him. "Today, there is no money for you to stay on this ship. So you will stay somewhere else." The security chief gestured. "Mr. and Mrs. St. James," he said, his tone all business. "Please disembark." They stepped onto the gangway, hesitating as if expecting the punchline of a joke. When their shoes touched the cracked concrete, they saw what waited: their luggage, the folder on top, the emptiness around. "What is this?" Kenyatta demanded, gripping a handle. "Where are we?" "A few hundred miles from the city," Oilia replied. "There's a town on the highway eventually. You'll figure it out. How are we supposed to get home?" Tavorius shouted, panic rising. "We don't have access to any accounts. You blocked everything. We don't have cash for a bus, nothing for food." "You always told everyone you were self-made," she said, leaning on the rail. "Said you did it all without help, that my generation was holding you back. Now you have a chance to prove it." He stumbled toward the edge of the dock as the crew began to pull in the gangway. "Please," he cried, voice cracking. "Forgive us. We'll pay everything back. We'll change. Don't leave us here. We're your family." "You were comfortable leaving me alone with bills and lies," she said quietly. "The difference is, you are young, strong, and capable of work. You wanted a life without my influence. Now you have it." The gangway clanked into place as the connection between ship and land broke. Engines rumbled to life, pushing the vessel slowly away from the dock. Fresh river water foamed between hull and concrete. Kenyatta's desperation curdled into rage. "You'll regret this," she screamed, kicking one of the suitcases. "You think money will keep you warm when you're old and alone? You'll die by yourself, with no one to hold your hand. I curse you for loneliness." Her curses were swallowed by distance and the churn of the water. From the height of the railing, the couple shrank into small shapes on a strip of concrete, surrounded by luggage that suddenly looked like dead weight. The folder beside their bags fluttered open in the wind, revealing the doctor's unpaid bill clipped to a notice about cancelled cards and the summary of the audit. Paper proof of how thoroughly their game had crumbled. Oilia watched for a moment longer, then turned away from the railing. Captain Thaddeus joined her. "Course back to New Orleans, Mrs. St. James?" he asked. "We can resume the original schedule." She looked forward. The river stretched ahead, bending out of sight, autumn colors starting to burn along its banks. The air smelled of silt and leaves, of endings and beginnings. "No, Captain," she said. "I've danced to schedules my whole life, work deadlines, school calendars, hospital appointments. I'm done with that." He cocked his head, curious. "Where to then?" "North," she replied. "All the way up. I've wanted to see the fall colors on the upper Mississippi since I was a young woman. I kept postponing it. First, the business. Then your predecessor's schedules. Then my husband. Then a son and grandchildren that never arrived. I'm finished postponing. A slow smile crept across his face. It will add 2 weeks to the trip, he said. A long detour. I have time, she answered simply. For the first time in years, I have nothing but time that belongs to me. He touched the brim of his cap and walked off to give the new orders. The ship's engines shifted power. The prow nudged into a different direction, slicing through the current, aiming upriver. Standing at the rail, watching the abandoned dock shrink into a speck, Oilia felt something she had almost forgotten: lightness. Not the false lightness of pretending everything was fine, but the deep, bone-level feeling of being unchained. A laugh rose in her chest, unexpected, bright, alive. She let it out, not caring who heard, an open, ringing laugh that startled a passing gull and echoed off the water. She had a ship under her feet, savings no longer leaking into other people's pockets, and a river full of miles ahead. Her story wasn't closing. It was changing course. Later, when she sat back in her suite, a camera light on and microphone live, she leaned toward it with a gentle smile and spoke to an invisible audience. My friends, she said, if you enjoyed this story, don't forget to subscribe, tap that like button, and write in the comments which city you're listening from. Your support helps me keep sharing these life tales. On the screen beside her, thumbnails for 2 more stories appeared, each holding its own lesson about love, family, and boundaries. Thank you for staying with me until the end, she added. With love and respect, until the next story. Outside, the gilded magnolia moved north, carrying a woman who was no longer just someone's mother, widow, or convenient wallet. She was herself again.